and your life.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live from the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here, now at the CoalitionRadioNetwork.com bunker. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And, of course, the mothership at CoalitionRadio.us, where you can find links to our broadcast, YouTube page, civil liberties page, all sorts of great stuff. So let's get down to it. Joining me in just a couple of moments is, I think, one of the most interesting, provocative, determined, articulate, new activists, relatively new activists, I should say, in the Libertarian Party. And I am going to ask her to give me a tutorial on how to pronounce her last name because I'm brutal. But Chase Tash is going to join me in just a moment. She is the head and chair of the Orleans County Libertarian Party and recently ran for state representative in the great state of New York, the Empire State, New York. Okay? So, for those of you who might be new to the program, every day is an adventure in independent media. We had a few board problems, even though we've got a brand new board, but we resolved those. A couple of video problems on our end, so we're running just a couple minutes late. Folks, we run a intermittent schedule of programming all week. We are the core program, the Coalition, which is a 3-hour interview program that broadcasts on Friday night, has been on the air for 6 years. In the last few weeks, though, interestingly enough, in a decision made immediately prior to the advent of the plague, as we call it here, the coronavirus, we decided to move into our own facility and start to work on gradually what we thought would be a incremental move to a full-blown network schedule of independent media. Well, fate and the events certainly don't allow for that. What we've had is, well, chaos. Fortunately enough, we focused, instead of our set design, if you will, internally, we decided to put together a remote program so that we have callers come from the libertarian world, the political world, the think tank world, from all over the country who call in, and we wanted to emphasize a more stable environment than, say, something Skype or even Zoom will allow you. So we run some fairly sophisticated software. We do have talk radio capability. So at some point in time, after our guest is on, because she's calling in through conventional lines, we will open up the line to callers. Imagine that, a Liberty call-in show, open up throughout the early and well into the evening, where we have open lines and you can discuss the guest who was on, or, well, literally just about any show you want. So I'm going to bring her on. I think this is her now. Bear with me just a second. Chase.
Hello.
Hey, how are you? Chase, is this
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Now,
Yes.
The first thing I'm going to ask is, I think, the first question everyone asks when they meet you. How do I properly pronounce your name?
It's Takach.
Takach. Okay, I'm gonna write
Yes.
that down phonetically. I'm a product of the New Jersey public school systems, so we just have to take it from there. Okay, all right. Well, Chase Takach, thanks for coming on. I know this has been a tumultuous week for you. I know you've got loved ones who are serving our armed forces and have been deployed as a result of this, and I know that's difficult. So we greatly appreciate the time you're taking to join us tonight. It was really important to me to have you on. I know we've spoken on and off over the last month or two, but I'm an older guy, and I've been in the liberty movement for not nearly as long as many that you'll meet. I've been active in the Libertarian Party for about 10 years or so, and there are people my age who have been in it for 30 or 40, and they're the founding folks of this party are an astonishing bunch. But clearly there represents a new generation of leaders. Somebody, if you haven't met, I hope you will soon. Connor Dragotis has been on this show a bunch of times. He's a genius when it comes to imaging and communications. All sorts of folks are running for elected office, and it's really, a product of a variety of movements have come together to give us all this fresh blood. So you, we've got a little background on you, but we're going to tell your story. But you're doing great things up there in New York. A lot of people are working very, very diligently to create, in one of the most challenging states in America, an active thriving liberty movement. So it was important for me to have you come on. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about your backstory. I always ask guests for the first time, how did you get involved, and what was your was there a liberty moment when you realized that you were driven to join this movement?
Well, see, I grew up with libertarian values, but I never actually heard of the Libertarian Party until about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually, I approached my dad, who has long been a registered libertarian, and I've always thought that he was a Republican, and I just kind of sat him down and I was like, you seem like a Republican, but a lot of your views are not Republican. So like, what exactly are you? He goes, I'm a libertarian. And that's the first time I heard of it, and I was like, oh, this sounds pretty cool. And, I'd looked into it and everything. It was perfect for me. It blew up from there. I just wanted to get immediately involved as soon as I learned about it.
Now, at the time, you were living in Florida, or you had moved to New York already?
I moved to New York about roughly 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when I was 18.
Okay.
I've lived all over the country, though, even before I moved here, so I have a little bit of experience in all the states.
Okay. The sensibility, the political sensibilities of New York and upper New York State. Now, I'm a native of the New York City metropolitan area. I'm in the 80s. I would have been what you would call a bridge and tunnel, which meant I was on the wrong side of the Holland Tunnel. And very much a product of the 70s. Although I'm proud to say I never fell sway to the disco movement. I was an Allman Brothers / Deadhead, still am, but upstate New York is an alternate universe from what folks characterize as Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan. What was going on up there? Was there a libertarian movement in place? What was the dynamic?
Well, originally when I found out about the LP, I went out immediately searching for like-minded people around me in my area. And, this was before there was a chapter in my county, because I had to find it because there wasn't one. So I actually ended up contacting Tony DeRazio, who was the chair of the Monroe County chapter, which I believe is the biggest in upstate. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure of that, but he pretty much gave me the lowdown of all of it. He's like, yeah, we've been trying to get an interim county organization started in Orleans County, and we just haven't found anybody who's willing to do the job. So it took me 2 years to find enough people and get enough petitions started, and I did what I had to do, and it was very, very, very difficult. A lot of stress went into that one for sure.
I think we're sort of. Excuse me, 1 second. There we go. So ultimately, then, as you started the Orleans Party, and tell us a little bit about Orleans County as well. Give us sort of the flavor of it, because upstate New York is such a diversified environment. Is it primarily rural?
Primarily rural, about 40,000 people population. Very, very conservative, very, very red. They don't like to hear about the kind of stuff that I'm involved in, but something tells me that I'm in the right place at the right time, because I feel like a lot of people around here have been begging for a shakeup. It's unbelievable how much corruption is here, and I think that they're just fed up enough with it to just be like, let's try something new. Despite what she does, let's just try it. And I think I got enough votes to say that, but it also helps that my family was actually from this place. I was actually born here when I was 2, and I moved away. I'm sorry, I was born here and then I moved away when I was 2. So I didn't really get to experience much here, but I have family history here, so that kind of helped me with getting attention and getting votes.
Right. Well,
I don't think that would have happened in Florida.
Now, for folks who aren't familiar with upstate New York, or you think of it as Albany, Albany is just a couple of hours outside of New York City. Albany is not upstate New York. You need to go to places like Plattsburgh, Buffalo, Erie, and all along, if you will, the Canadian border to really understand New York. And the New York Assembly, State Assembly, has been long dominated by upstate New York characters, contrary to what the popular belief would be. And when you think of New York corrupt politicians, you think of Tammany Hall, you think of New York City, you think of this guy Cuomo, by the way, who's the governor, is, believe me, no saint at all.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all.
But there was a special character in recent New York history, a guy named Sheldon Silver, who was the head of the assembly. And it seems like every state's got a Sheldon Silver, but he was ultimately indicted. He was able to obtain this is all legal record, millions of dollars in bribes, kickbacks, and that's what the feds actually were able to uncover. So the upstate New York mob-like environment in the state assembly is just brutal, and upstate New York has suffered as a result. And when you go down to the city, up until the events of the last few weeks, you saw great prosperity, the financial markets obviously dominating, corporate headquarters, untold riches. You get into Westchester County, Southern Orange County, places like that, you see, the results of a lot of vacation homes, the aura of New York City carries forth. When you get into the real heart of upstate New York, there's a great deal of unemployment. It's primarily agrarian where that works. And, even in places, right, even in places like Plattsburgh. I'm sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Our county has one of the highest welfare, rates. So, I completely understand that.
Yeah. So this is the environment that you're starting to work into. What did people, in terms of your political beliefs, what did they embrace at first, and what do you find challenging? Or what do they find challenging in the libertarian philosophy? Well,
considering the fact that our county has such a high rate of overdose deaths, and it's a touchy topic to bring up because there's a lot of opioid users, and just so when I started to talk about the legalization of marijuana, obviously enough people know that legalizing weed gets a lot of people off of opiates. So that was one thing that a lot of people were happy to hear about. Which was actually part of my start in this, was when I went to, I initially went to one of the first legislature meetings when I started my campaign, and my opponent, he was like, no way, we cannot legalize this, it's dangerous. And I was like, okay, this needs to change. I don't want to live here, or I'm going to change it. So that, and I think, as much as people say that sex work is controversial, there's over 40 million watchers of porn. So
right.
I doubt that that's going to be a challenge.
Right. No, absolutely. So the war on drugs was an issue. I mean, New York State also has a high level of incarceration and one of the most brutal prison systems in the nation. I mean, just the words Attica resonate with my generation, certainly.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So the war on drugs was attractive. Now, these folks, as you mentioned, it's a very red, primarily Republican area. What other issues? I mean, talk about the lunch pail issues. Is there a high degree of unemployment? I would imagine, and how are folks supporting themselves up there?
Well, the high rate of unemployment is obviously a huge issue, but the taxes. I mean, I'm a homeowner, and the taxes are outrageous. So something that we could technically control at county level is allowing people to beautify their homes without worrying that their taxes are going to go up as a result. Mm-hmm. And I kind of push for, simple things like that. It's, oops, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You're good.
Broke out a little bit. But just little things like that, and just being able to sit and talk to people and hearing what they want to see change instead of just, sorry, it's like going in and out.
Yeah, no worries. You sound great over here. So just keep bowling right ahead. No worries.
Yeah. The main issues I was pushing was basically drug decriminalization and sex work decriminalization. Those were like my biggest issues in the lowering of taxes. Obviously, I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter. So that really caught on with the locals. Was like, I should half jokingly said that we should be able to buy handguns out of vending machines. So that was a good push. But
yeah, no, it's so in a real sense, I'm sure there's a pretty strong 2A community up there. You used the Second Amendment and some agreement on economics to then present a libertarian alternative.
Yeah.
Now, state government looms large all over upstate New York. It's a significant employer. How do people in upstate New York view, even before the disasters of the last few weeks in New York? Do they view it kindly? Is it sort of considered a benefactor? Or how do they view their state government?
Oh, they hate it. I mean, like just the red flag laws, the SAFE Act. It's insane. Like even personally, being a gun owner, I'm afraid to just bring my own legal gun around. like that's crazy. And a way that I kind of approached that topic locally, because there's also a high rate of single mothers, was I sat down with a lot of single moms and I was like, hey, listen, you're going to want to own a gun. You're alone at home with your children, vulnerable. Maybe you should own a gun. So it's just simple things like that made my approach a little bit easier.
Right. So you identified with folks. How did the campaign go? I mean, what were the objections thrown at your way? In terms of, and given the rural nature of the community, did you do a lot of door-to-door, or were you having meetings, outreach? Was a lot of it digital? Give us a flavor of how your campaign ran.
A lot of it was digital, but luckily during the time when I first started my campaign, there was a lot of festivals going on, like the 4-H Fair, the Strawberry Festival, and just any festival that came up, I got a permit, I got in, I got a booth, and I just talked to everybody that I possibly could. Of course, I had my committee there. My foot soldiers going around and handing out my flyers and just doing everything they possibly could to get me the votes. And it worked out in my favor. I got the highest third party vote count in the county's history. Just my first time. So it was definitely exhilarating.
No, I can tell. Tell us about your committee and the Orleans County Libertarian Party, because this to me represents the heart and blood, and the soul, if you will, of the Libertarian Party.
It's just about as diverse as it can possibly get. I have people from all over, all different walks of life in my committee, and so I'm hearing the opinions of basically everybody in the county just in my committee, in a strange way of saying. But a lot of people who are living, in the poor communities that they want to get out, and they're like, how do I get out? My taxes are so high, and that I can't find anything other than an entry-level job anywhere. And I'm like, let's work together. That's all we can do is work together as a team.
What's the state of education in Orleans County? Where's the nearest SUNY? I mean, SUNY, if you haven't lived in New York, you probably don't have a flavor. The SUNY system is a lot like the California college system. They're everywhere. There's a SUNY for just about everyone. I've had a lot of friends go to SUNY Binghamton, for example, which has got a lot of great programs, and obviously out on Long Island as well. Where is the nearest state university?
Well, I go to Brockport. University. I'm in my third year there. We got Buffalo State University. We got Rochester. We got RIT. So the schools are great, but for elementary school and middle school and any grade school, it's all indoctrination. I'm heavily pushing for homeschooling, like for anybody that can afford to do it.
Mm-hmm. And do folks in your community or in the greater within your county affiliate, is there a significant homeschooling presence, or is this something really new to the area?
Oh, that's totally new to the area. It's because daycares are so expensive, so they feel that they kind of have to have school as some sort of a babysitter or daycare.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be hard to convince people to get them to homeschool their kids, but it's definitely a worthy cause because there's a lot of indoctrination going on, right, for sure.
I mean, do the schools test well? I mean, in the local public schools, I mean, are they relatively well run, or do you think there's grounds there to start to build up not only a homeschooling movement, but even some type of voucher program, or better yet, some type of alternative support, so that we can, one of my favorite hashtags, by the way, is end public education. So I'm not exactly reticent. I'm not exactly low key about it. Arvin Vohra calls it theft education. I agree with him completely unapologetic. So how do people feel about public education in the area? Is it successful at all?
I mean, so far I've seen that. I think Holly has one of the best has one of the best grade schools. So I mean, I'm not totally against public schooling, to be honest. It's just I just push for homeschooling. I'm not too pushy on the education topic, I guess, because I had a good experience with school here. I really can't complain. It's hard to complain because I went to school here, and I actually had a really good time at school here. So, but that was grad school, so I didn't actually go to elementary school here.
Right.
But
okay. So tell folks about the election? How did it end up? It seems like you did very, very well. How did you end up for your first time out?
I made out with 12.1% of the votes, which is 722 votes, and I don't know. I'm pretty proud of myself.
No, that's.
I hope that I do better next time.
And were you running against a Democratic incumbent, a Republican incumbent, or was it a three-way election?
Yeah, I was running against a Republican incumbent.
Okay. That's outstanding. When you can from scratch break in like that and make that type of impression that quickly, that's outstanding. Now, are you planning on running again, or are you working on candidates? And when is the next election cycle? For upstate New York?
Well, the next one for me would be in the next 2 years, because we just had it in November. Because I do plan on running again for at-large legislature, but in the meantime, I'm also running for Carlton Town Planning Board, just to get as much experience as I can during the time. Try to stay productive.
But
I plan on running till I win. That's my goal. I'm going to run till I win.
You have to stay in the public eye, and that's hard to do. People get frustrated very often when they lose. And my experience has been that most folks, the first time out, sometimes the 2 or 3 times out, and that can be disheartening to folks. You can't take that personally.
Oh no. I'm proud of myself. I'm extremely proud of myself for just even getting as far as I have. And in the meantime, I'm just probably going to be focusing on Dwayne Whitmer's campaign, and if anything, because he's still in the race and he's doing great.
Right, and tell us a little bit about that, because I'm hoping folks will get a flavor, if you will, of what's going on in upstate New York.
Yeah, so Dwayne is running for the 27th district, which is my district. He's running for Congress against Nate McMurray I believe. But he's definitely kicking ass out there for sure. I'm proud of him. He's doing great.
No, that's outstanding. So you're running for planning board. For folks who haven't considered board level appointments or board level elections, those are amazing ways to get involved in the community. Something like planning board is, you're meeting folks, you're working with folks, you're collaborating with folks, and it allows you very quickly to interject libertarian values into
absolutely
everyday government. So, when is that election?
Well, I think they're sending out interviews. I don't exactly know when they're doing it. I know that they just agreed to advertise for the position, so I'm just kind of waiting on that. But at least get experience on like the local zoning laws and building regulations and all that fun jazz. But I'm excited either way. I'm going to run till I win. That's the biggest goal right now.
Now, is that an elected office, or is that an appointed office?
That's appointed.
Okay. No, and that's fairly typical of board level positions. And particularly in those areas where they might go, God forbid, unfilled. Again, that's where we have an opportunity nationally. Pennsylvania was very, very successful in finding appointed positions, finding positions that were open, that had in many cases had folks who were longtime incumbents, folks who decided not to run again. That's
absolutely.
That's a hell of a way to implement. What would if you're appointed to the planning board? What are some of your thoughts about what you'd like to change, what you like, and what you want? What do you want to see? What do you want to see improve?
Well, for now, it's just kind of going to be a learning experience because if anything, I'm only 24 years old. There's only so much that I know, and there's a lot more that I can learn from that point.
Right.
I went to one of the town planning board meetings, and there was basically a short discussion about a woman who was complaining that her mailbox was on the other side of the road. So instead of calling the post office and suggesting that she has her mailbox moved to her side of the road, she had the whole speed limit slowed down for everybody on the road. So they kind of all just, shook their heads and agreed to it. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of strange. Why didn't we just have her move her mailbox to her side of the road? So, simple things like that, really.
Well, that's local government. That's, I call them lunch pail issues. That's absolutely local government. Now, on a local level, having never, I've driven through your county. I've never spent a lot of time there. But are you looking at? Is there much retail development going on, or is it fairly?
Oh, there's no. I don't want to say nothing. Medina has a lot going on. They have a lot of improvement. Albion, nothing. Just it's completely dead. I want to open up a business locally, but I don't even know if it's worth it at this point, especially with the virus going on. But
right.
Now it's kind of unpredictable what's going on too because of the virus. So.
Prior to the virus, in your opinion, what and clearly you've mentioned high unemployment, you've mentioned issues with dependencies and things like that, but in your mind, the single biggest obstacle to development, was it the high taxes? Is it property taxes? Is it zoning?
The tax? Oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Taxes are insane. It's almost unlivable. But I'd rather stay here and fix it than just be like, I don't like this and leave, and then just give up on the place that, my family is from and has a big history in. And I feel like I owe it to, if not myself, but my family to make this place better. Right.
No, and that's the heart of voluntarism, and that's the heart of volunteering, and that's the heart of civic activism. That's what we do as libertarians. We don't pick up and run.
Protect liberty. Yeah, to protect liberty. That's the main goal, if anything.
And in areas like, just from my experience in upstate New York, there are areas where you're going to have to, in a sense, train folks as to what their liberties are sometimes. It's astonishing the degree with which people have given up their individual rights to states and communities, very often not even aware of what they've given up. You're in upstate New York, I think, you had obviously a huge rebellion against some of the really brutal, intrusive gun laws that New York has. So people get 2A, but I don't think they get things like search and seizure. I don't think that they even understand what they're missing or what they're giving up. So I don't know. It's kind of tragic, isn't it?
It is. And I feel like I'm learning something new every day that I want to change about this place, which is good and bad at the same time. But I don't know. It's a worthy cause to fix this place. There's a lot of potential here. Living in Miami for as long as I did, and just seeing the kind of things that I saw, it's like, I don't want this place to turn into that. Like, just simple things with the drug decriminalization and sex work decriminalization. Like, they don't realize, like, what I saw out there is it can happen anywhere. So New York is definitely on its way to turning into, like, the war zone that is Miami. I see what direction it's heading in.
What are the single biggest issues up in your area in terms of drug abuse? Is it meth? Is it
It's heroin and opiates, OPWs, and it's hard for me to say this because I support people's right to use drugs. I mean that they're consenting adults. That's what they want to do, but I also don't think that they should be considered criminals because of it. And it's overflowing the prison population, and it's just ridiculous.
Are there facilities? I mean, what type of bed space is there for folks who are looking to go into recovery? Is there much support for folks in your part of New York State?
Well, they have JACASA, which is a program around here for addicts, and they give them the Suboxone and the methadone and the stuff that's basically also getting them high. So I mean, I don't really see it as a treatment option. They're either throwing them in jail or they're giving them other drugs that also get them high. So it doesn't seem like a very good solution to me. And not just that, but with the ridiculous marijuana criminalization laws, you have children that are getting taken from their parents for smoking weed and being put through a foster care system of abuse. So, I mean, that's another whole issue that, I see happening and I've seen happen. So.
Right. So are things, I mean, things like fentanyl test strips, different, I would say more modern methods of harm reduction, are they available in your part of New York, or is just everyone on their own? Is it just sort of the Wild West?
The fentanyl?
No, fentanyl test strips, different ways that folks can get intervention or support, or even just protect themselves from killing themselves. We had someone on from.
They have programs that give out like Narcan and like stuff like that, but I don't really see anything else besides that. Mm-hmm. There really isn't much.
Interesting. You're pretty provocative in terms of your in terms of your career in adult entertainment. How did folks in upstate well, no, and that's fine. I mean, here the hashtag here is sex work is real work. We've dedicated a few hundred hours of programming to having sex worker rights activists on in terms of recent legislation both at the federal and the state level. Laws that conflate trafficking with really nothing less than Second Amendment infringements on folks who are actively involved in sex work. We believe in decriminalization here. The Nordic model has to go, and we don't even use the term victimless crime here because there's, if it's consensual and there's two adults involved, there's no victim and there's certainly no crime. What is the milieu, the environment up in upstate New York like relative to that?
So when I first started running my campaign, I actually didn't talk about it at all. Like, I talked about the decriminalization of it, but I didn't actually talk about my own personal work in it. Mm-hmm. Because I was actually married and I wasn't actually active in the business at the time. I was married for basically the past 4 years. Right. I started off in sex work and I ended up getting married shortly afterwards. But during my campaign, not so sadly, it was pretty civil, but I ended up actually getting separated. Mm-hmm. But after that, so basically I got back into it and it just kind of blew up because I was also in the middle of a campaign. Yep. So, that's, it went hand in hand, but honestly, I mean, I got really good feedback from people. I mean, like there's the people here and there that would, snicker at me and, say that I'm, worthless or whatever, what have you. And then there would be 10 more people that would jump in and say, you're wrong. And, what she's doing is courageous. Or so I feel like I'm having more support than letdown. And that's what kind of keeps me going.
Interesting. Within upstate New York, is there an active, thriving adult entertainment industry, or is it really just individual choice? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Not really. I mean, it's kind of hidden. It's still kind of seen as seedy, and the stigma is still up here. But I'm hoping that I can change that at least.
Right. Bring it out into the open.
Bring it out of the woodwork. Yeah.
How is New York State on that? I mean, do you find, is New York State fairly oppressive on that? I mean, it's ironic, New York City. I don't know if you saw the television series The Deuce. I mean, I just remember growing up and working in New York City as a young man that you were surrounded by it. And now, of course, in the typical prohibition model that government has failed for so long, by attempting to prohibit it, they've actually made it more dangerous and more difficult for the folks involved in it. Is New York State, their attitudes need to change? Have you been involved in any of the decriminalization movement?
Well, I know that the Democrats have kind of claimed to be part of the decriminalization movement, but they're also kind of leaning more towards legalization, which is not my goal. Keeping it at full decriminalization. Republicans are like, no, that's not happening at all. And since all of pretty much New York City, like above New York City, is red, that's where the issue lies. So it's going to be difficult convincing the Republicans to get on board with the sex work decrim. But I think that the way that I ran my campaigns, like in the beginning, and they knew me as a person, they didn't know me as a sex worker yet. Mm-hmm. That helped a lot. Actually, I think it wasn't actually done on purpose. It just kind of worked out that way. Like they met me and I was still married, so I still wrapped my hair up because I'm Jewish, and I wrapped my hair in a tickle. And I wore very conservative clothing, and of course I still had tattoos, but it kind of made it easier for them to talk to me on a more personal level. But then after I came out as a sex worker, they're like, oh my God,
Well, now, I'm curious about that, because that's an interesting transition.
Yeah.
I've always maintained that when it came to any individual community's rights, a movement for human rights and civil rights, I've worked in New York City in the 70s and 80s. So I had a front row seat, if you will, to the mobilization of the medical community to respond to AIDS, to the gay rights movement. First row seat for all that. And I actually, my first couple jobs, I worked in the entertainment community. So you obviously looked at the world from a different perspective. My contention has always been that when folks meet people and then find out that their friends, their brothers, their sisters, someone they play software is involved in a community, whether it be the gay community, the LGBTQIA community, whether it be sex workers, then all of a sudden it becomes humanized, and the stigma and the awkwardness and the confusion, it just goes away because folks are just folks. They're just involved in something different. It was that sort of the reaction generally? Did you find any sort of backlash at all?
Well, there was a few people around the area that knew, like, that I used to do it. So, like, but I don't really think that enough people knew. But yeah, that's pretty much how it went. Like when I went to the festivals and I did like the door to door, and I was dressed completely like conservative. I had my hair all wrapped up. I looked very professional, and like that was my first presentation to the county for the first like 2 or 3 months of my campaign. So that's pretty much what they knew me as. Even the first article written about me showed me very conservatively dressed. And so when I came out, it helped a lot with media, of course, when I came out as a sex worker, but it definitely didn't bring down any votes, I don't think.
Right.
I think it helped my campaign, if anything, with being transparent, which is a breath of fresh air for a lot of them.
Now, you have gotten international coverage as a result of this. I mean, you've got newspapers and you've got coverage in Western Europe for this. When you meet people from the media and they talk to you, I've gotten the sense that there's a real genuine interest in your political views, that it's not just a sensationalized thing. And I give you a lot of credit for that, because that's, you're steering the interview per se, and, to a large degree, you can control that.
Yeah.
What have folks now started to look at your views that might never have considered them because of your background?
Oh, absolutely. 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 Like some people that were anti-gun that were, that are no longer anti-gun, or just for any topic. Like, I feel like just because they got to know me as a person first before they got to know me as a sex worker, it's unbelievable how many minds I feel like I've changed. Like, even not just the mind changing, but opening minds to people who have never heard of these issues before. And that's most people. Is most people just kind of have their head buried in the sand and they don't know what's actually going on around them. So,
well, that's it. I mean, it's what you've done here is you've opened up the conversation, and that even accomplishing that, and you've done so much more, but even accomplishing a beginning of a conversation, that's notable in and of itself, because it's a conversation, quite frankly, that's happening in major cities, much less so anecdotally, across the country. And it's a conversation that needs to happen. Well,
it also helps that most people my age that look like me are socialists. And that's all that people my age that look like me have to look up to, or, people like AOC, or, just, so it's kind of like I'm giving them another option. Like, oh, you don't have to be a Democrat, like, to, when you're young. Like, there's other options out there. Most people have never even heard of the Libertarian Party.
Right.
So when they see the tattooed dominatrix, they're like, oh, it's the Libertarian Party. So if it brings any attention is good attention at this point.
No, that's an excellent insight. You're a young person. You're right. Right now, this morning, as we speak, there was a genuine collective nervous breakdown amongst progressives around the country as Bernie, for the second major election in a row, went pretty far, but ultimately ended up bailing. And to a lot of people, I think the real offenses for the second time ended up endorsing the establishment candidate, which.
Exactly.
What have you found?
I honestly have no idea how that happened. I have no idea how they ended up with Biden. With how much support I saw for Bernie, I was like, what? How did this happen? Because the young people aren't going out and voting. So hopefully I can convince them to.
What type of conversation do you have? Because politics is largely generational, regardless of what people say. And I can meet folks your age all the time, and they'll be polite. Usually, they'll have a conversation, they'll engage, but I'm not going to be able to make that connection that you are with people in your generation. It's just how it works. So, what do folks in your generation ask you when you're clearly not a Bernie-crat, and you're clearly not a progressive, and you clearly don't support quote unquote common sense gun control, yet at the same time, you're far better, you're far stronger on issues of human rights like sex work and decriminalization and the legalization of drugs. What are you met with a lot of confusion and chaos? What kind of conversations do you have?
Well, the shock value usually brings them in first is, wow, oh my God, how are you able to do both careers at the same time? And once I'm able to kind of draw them in, I'm able to, explain the importance of like libertarian values to them, and it's common sense once they start listening. I mean, sorry,
nope,
my phone's dying.
No, you're good.
It doesn't take much to convince somebody that consenting adults should, be left alone. Like it really doesn't take much before they've been brainwashed, I guess.
Right. What issues resonate with folks in your generation the most? When you have those conversations with people your age politically, when you are out on the campaign trail?
Well, when they've had brothers and sisters or mothers or fathers that have died from an opiate overdose, and they're hearing our side of the story, of the drug decrim, topic. And obviously, I'm sure all your viewers already know about all that. But once they hear our libertarian solutions to that, they get excited about it. They're like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. Like, why didn't we think of this before? Like, this could have saved my brother. This could have saved my sister. And it pretty much all comes down to that. Like,
no,
that's
right.
The biggest issue around here. Yeah.
So okay, so the opioid epidemic. Oh my God! All right, that's actually that's the most challenging issue. Okay, one of the reasons we have this conversation, by the way, folks, tomorrow as part of the libertarian movement on something called LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, we have an hour, and I'm going to get you on this as well, Chase. An hour, we call it an hour with the candidates, and we talk about how the libertarian philosophy, self-ownership, body autonomy, free markets, how that can be used to resonate with folks through the perspective of local issues. And the single biggest challenge to libertarian candidates, I think, is walking away from the in-depth economic conversations and the philosophical conversations and the long-running arguments about this economist or that economist, all of which are important and very much part of our life and something we are proud of and we should acknowledge. But how do you then translate that to folks who may not be that political, get up every day, go to work, trying to figure out a way, especially in times like this, that they can save their families from this madness, that they can earn a living and literally survive. In so many cases, it really comes down to survival. So it's all about local issues. Now, I'm not sure, have you had an opportunity on a political level to interact with folks who are in the sex worker rights movement?
Do you know Norma Jean?
Yeah, absolutely. She's been on the show.
Yeah. Yes. So she actually reached out to me recently, and I'm like, I had no idea that other sex workers have ran for office before. I was like, oh my gosh, like I was fangirling. I'm not gonna lie. So, and she's just so brilliant. I've read all about her, and local sex workers have been reaching out to me a lot. I go out to strip clubs and I hand them my card, like telling them about the Libertarian Party and that we support them and we support their rights. And it's been a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. If I can even change my mind.
No, absolutely. My perspective, and I wonder what yours has been, when I meet folks who are sex worker rights advocates, they're very, very libertarian when it comes to sex work. Very, very libertarian. They're very, very much socialist when it comes to how to then support folks who are in the sex worker movement or how to approach local government. They're very, very progressive, sometimes outright socialists. And it's a dichotomy that's challenging. And you're on one hand, folks are saying, I want the freedom to pursue my life as I see fit. And of course they should be, that's the only entitlement I believe in. They should have that right.
Yeah.
But everything else, it's be prepared for that, because it's a shock the first couple of times it happens, because unfortunately, because the system has hobbled them so and put so many challenges and so many roadblocks in terms of them and their life that quite frankly, they see the solution as being government when in fact it's government that's making their life difficult.
Exactly. And I think sometimes they just need to hear it from another sex worker. They don't want to hear it from, a suit and tie guy that has never worked in the industry before.
Right.
They just need to hear it from somebody that who knows what they're going through and knows that, they should be keeping 100% of their income. And the amount that's taken out for taxes, even for webcamming, is ridiculous. So, I kind of laugh about this sometimes. Even as a candidate, it's kind of hard for when I'm canvassing and I knock on people's doors and I say, hey, let me tell you how I'm going to leave you alone.
No, but you're right. Peer outreach is always the way to break the ice in terms of talking about philosophy, economics, politics, as they impact your day-to-day life. There's no substitute for that. Which is why I encourage libertarians to turn off the computer and go out and do exactly what you've done, which is to reach out to people personally. There's doesn't matter whether you're in a rural environment or the city. There's no substitute for that kind of human interaction, that human contact, even if we have to do it somewhat digitally these days.
And it's so hard. I understand because, and it may not seem like it, but I am a huge introvert. It is so difficult for me to get out of my shell and talk to people. I get so nervous and I start shaking and, I start to, forget all the things that I know. But for most people, just try to push through it. Just fight the good fight, because eventually it's going to be worth it. People just need to hear what the libertarians have to say. Like, as long as, we have a lot of good things to say. So if we could just get out of our shells and get out of our houses and just, as hard as I know it is, we have to do it. Because, if I can do it, then anybody can do it. Because it's definitely very difficult for me.
Yeah, but at the same time, let me guess. The minute you get into the zone where you're involved and sort of you get that eye-to-eye contact going with a constituent or a group of constituents or folks that you're preaching to, if you will, the first time, you find yourself, because I can tell from your conversation, you find yourself in a zone that you don't want to leave. You want to maintain that type of involvement, that type of connection with individuals, because you've got the fire. You've got something that you want to say to them that you think could change their lives, and that's why I wanted to talk to you tonight. Because how do you bottle that? How do you spread that out to other folks, say in your generation, without feeling like that burning is only out there?
They definitely need to do their homework. If that just means going on libertarian kind of websites or just talking to local libertarian chapters and just remembering and hearing things over and over again and just being able to recite that to the people that you are trying to change their mind. That's been my tactic so far. It's like just kind of like remembering, just trying to remember over and over again all the important values of the Libertarian Party, and that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're just joining us, we have on the line with us via telephone Chase Tkach. She is an activist and entrepreneur. She's involved in the adult entertainment community. She is the chair of the Orleans County, New York Libertarian Party. She ran her first election for the New York General Assembly just a few short months ago, garnering nearly 12% of the vote for the first time against an incumbent Republican in a very, very red district. To me, she represents a lot of things. Number one, someone who's young and involved heavily already in the libertarian movement and the liberty movement as a leader. Number two, someone who understands the challenges facing young folks, even pre-corona, now in corona, in terms of the economic challenges, the job challenges. She's intimately involved in the community as a homeowner and as a volunteer. To me, she represents the very best of the young libertarian movement, the type of folks that we need to energize and the type of folks that we need to unleash, if you will, on a country who seemingly and is shifting more and more progressive at a time when we've just had a major crisis. And I love your reaction to this, Chase. It seems like the first thing that the government's done, particularly in the state of New York, in reaction to the crisis we're in, is to engage in libertarian behavior. Your very statist government in New York all of a sudden is opening up distribution channels, making it easier for people to regain or move with professional licensing. All of these things. Are you surprised by that? And do you think they'll acknowledge it once this is all over, that they were willing to all of a sudden become libertarian for a few weeks?
I would only hope so. Any legislation that's been able to be pushed away from this coronavirus was never needed in the first place. That's number one.
Yep.
I really hope it sticks. That's all I can say.
How are folks now? Again, for folks just listening, Chase is in upstate New York, upstate New York, far away from the maddening crowds. How are folks reacting to life under corona up there? It's, again, as in a somewhat rural area already, you've got isolation and separation, but how has it impacted people's lives up there?
Well, just walking into Walmart, there's like certain lines that you have to go in. They only allow a certain amount of people in. Everybody's wearing a mask, and thank God. It's definitely like a dystopia feeling. There's not a lot of cars on the road when you go outside. It's quiet and everybody's depressed, and I can feel everybody economically suffering. It's definitely a hard time for everybody, and especially even in my own home. My boyfriend just got deployed for a couple of months for an SAD mission. He's going to be out there testing people for the virus, and now I'm basically going to be handling my own home life on my own. So it's tough. And I know I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people out there, and their significant other, their wife or husband is out there, and they're just trying to make sure everybody's safe.
Right. What is, has he been deployed within New York State?
Yeah.
Okay. So he'll literally be on the front line of this. God bless him and God bless you and for their efforts in that. I mean, it's, it's interesting how we're relying on the citizen soldier to do what an incredible federal bureaucracy seems incapable of, which is, we've spent untold billions, probably more, on and all this federal government has done is pretty much screw up just about everything. They're still trying to figure out ways to get involved in the distribution channel of getting basic test kits and test supplies out to folks in the field. How about, I don't know, letting the people who do that for a living do that? Call me crazy. Why the federal government thinks it can be efficient at anything is beyond me. And, New York State, the notion that they're on the front lines and we're relying on New York State government. Yeah, that's not a good feeling. What?
Well, I mean, even some of the stories I've heard, they're having nurses be put in a position where they either are forced to test people for the virus and expose themselves, and some of these nurses have people at home who are immunodeficient and could die from the virus, or they're being forced to resign. So it's a sad time.
Absolutely. If you've got a message that you can leave us with, because we're gonna replay this. You've got a message to folks, not only in just your generation, but as someone who is younger yet has accomplished so much so quickly in terms of trying to support the push for liberty for everyone. What would you like to leave folks with? What's Chase Tkach's message to the libertarian movement and for folks out in the regular world?
My biggest message is we're going to fight a lot in our lives. Liberty is one thing that we all should be fighting for. It's the only thing any of us should be fighting for right now. Not each other, not anything else. The only thing we should be fighting for is liberty.
There you go. Where can folks get a hold of you if they'd like to on any one of a different number of levels politically? I know we're going to share this in New York State. How can folks get involved in the libertarian movement, particularly if they're up in your neck of the woods, or if folks want to just reach out to you and just have an opportunity to look for you for inspiration and get some ideas?
Sure. They can just message me on Facebook. Just Chase Tkach is my name on Facebook. I also have a Facebook page for my Libertarian Party of Orleans County. They have a Twitter. They can hit me up on Twitter. It's Molly Smash 1. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from everybody.
No, and I look forward to having you on the LPT TV show, particularly as we get closer to the election. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For having me on.
No, thanks for joining us tonight. Chase Tkach, again, activist, politician, entertainer, chairman of the Orleans County, New York Libertarian Party, and someone who is taking liberty very personally, someone who gets it, and someone who is going to spend an awful lot of time, already has, on behalf of a whole lot of other people out the world. A lot of life lessons can be learned here. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break. If you'd like to make calls, 401-205-3738. If you have questions, Chase unfortunately had to call in via the normal telephone line, so we weren't able to hold her over. We are able to do that, and we're working on refining some of the tech issues. We've only been on the air now for about a week and a half, so we ask you to bear that. But if you've got a question, 401-205-3738. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born, free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live broadcast. I just said that. We were on Go Local Live for about 3 years. It was a great experience, Friday nights from 6 to 9 o'clock. That was the extent of it. Now, in moving to our own facility, we've got the ability to intermittently during the day bring on guests like Chase. We're going to be doing some extensive programming over the weekend. Tomorrow night, we've got Paul Roselli joining us. He is the executive director of the Burrillville Land Trust. I got to know Paul really well during the issues surrounding the Invenergy power plant. He'll be joining us at about 6 or so. In the 8 o'clock hour, we have LPTV, as I've mentioned a few times, and then we go late into the night. And we'll have guests on and off all weekend as we bring together kind of a cohesive slate of programming. Again, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And again, give us a call at 401-205-3738. I know Rick Santuri was one of the folks who was posing a question. Let me go down through some of the comments. Why would these people want to share in the wealth of their country? That I can't tell. You know, Rick, if you'd like to call in, I'd love to have that conversation with you. Rick Santuri, as a dominatrix, she could probably convert a lot of older white Republican men. Yeah, hey, not going to go there. Not going to touch that. Rick pointing out the fact that probably more people are interested in Chase than they are I won't disagree with that one little bit. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of issue with the video feed coming out of upstate New York, and that was a problem. Jared, I'm sorry we bored you. Oh, my God, why even have a show? Well, here's the deal on that. We like to say we are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media. We're not going to appeal to everyone. And a lot of the interviews, a lot of the subject matter we cover is what I call third rail stuff. Issues that folks don't want to discuss. So we don't do the outrage porn thing. I know that there are people who do that, and that's fine. That's their choice. That's why this is America. You get to make your choice in terms of programming. We're shooting for something a little different. Notice I didn't say better or higher or different per se because we're judging those folks. That's the approach that they like to take to media today. So when we say we're outrage porn free, what I mean by that is that we're not going to prey on your emotions. We're not going to discuss issues like what's your favorite color, or or some kid, the example I always like to use is some kid wears a death metal T-shirt to school and he gets sent home, and people on the radio for 2 hours fight about whether or not he should have been sent home or not. Of course he shouldn't have been sent home. It's the First Amendment. The kid's got a right to wear a death metal T-shirt if he wants. God bless America. We're not going to argue, for example, for 2 hours about a Marine holding an umbrella for President Obama. I'm no fan of President Obama. My progressive friends know that. But you know what? I'm not going to argue about that because there are more pressing matters. There's big issues. There's more complicated issues. So if you're looking for easily digestible, linear, if I do A, B will happen type of conversations, not going to happen. Simply not going to happen. I have folks from every end of the political spectrum on. I've had it this week. We had a great interview with Sam Bell. That's up there on the Facebook page at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Ran over an hour. Did I agree with everything he said? No, I didn't. But again, here's the other point. I'm not here to argue with people. I'm not here to convince them. I'm interested, for example, with someone like Sam Bell, who I have a lot of personal respect for. I said it. I don't demonize people because they disagree with me politically. I just don't. I look at their character and I look at their actions. If they are not trying to hurt me. And Sam Bell, I think, is when it comes to a legislator who's deeply connected to his community, is a great example. We even have some of the same goals. We have vastly different ways of getting there, and that's kind of been the ongoing debates. And I met him when he had just formed the Progressive Democrats in conjunction with a group of folks. Boy, it's got to be 6-7 years ago when he was still a grad student. But I will say this, and I'm going to have him on the show again when we're set up a little bit better for debates and formatting. I will do the same thing that I did when I had an opportunity to fill in for Tara Granahan on WPRO. One of those nights, I actually had Sam on in studio. And at that time, I believe it was the first time he'd ever been in residence at WPRO, whether it be even on the phones. And I thought, okay, here we go, folks. Here comes the windup. This ought to be quite a battle. To my astonishment and thorough disappointment, not a single person called in to debate any of the issues that Sam was advocating for. This, despite at the time being, if you will, public enemy number one by all sorts of tough guys on call-in radio. But when given the opportunity to actually engage in a back and forth, engage in a debate, engage, if you will, in the battle of ideas, not cliches, not how can many different ways can we came up with a new name for Obama, blah, 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 blah. Again, no fan of President Obama. I'm a freaking libertarian, for God's sake. But nothing. Crickets. This was on the biggest radio station in this part of New England. Those guys do an amazing job. I call it Rhode Island's Town Hall when I call in there. And they've been nice enough to have me as a guest. Matt Allen, great show. If you're around during the afternoons, and because of obvious reasons now, take a listen. You won't always agree, but ultimately, if we are going to grow as a body politic and coalesce as a nation again, particularly in these trying times, we have to understand that it is not a mortal sin to disagree. It's the manner in which we disagree that is or more important. It's the manner in which we try to come up with effective conversations. Rick Sartorius went out. Rick, I wish you'd give me a call at 401-205-3738. I thought she was an interesting guest. Young people who came up through the Great Recession, burdened with college debt, facing a gig economy, and now with COVID, losing their jobs, of course, social democratic policies that better distribute the country's wealth will be appealing. And that's going to be center point. Rick, you're absolutely right. That's going to be the issue, center stage, I should say, in this year's upcoming presidential election. We are facing a choice so pronounced. Everyone talks all the time about what is the most important election in your lifetime. And every 4 years, this is the most important election in your lifetime. And they might be right this time. We face a profound decision. What direction this nation is going to go in. Now, anyone who's ever met me or listened to me understands that I believe that liberty, personal choices, self-ownership, we always say body autonomy, that is the method with which we should move this nation forward. Clearly, people disagree. Let's look at the COVID response. To me, this is a demonstration of the failed role of central government. Other people walk away with a completely different lesson from this. They say, well, this is why we need big government. And again, as I look upon the government's inability to coordinate, I'll put it this way. I don't know what's worse. The inability of a government to coordinate the delivery of these test kits because there's some moving parts involved, or the very notion that they would interject themselves into the delivery of these test kits. I don't know which is worse. They're both appalling to me. Companies like CVS and Caremark and all these incredible companies exist and on a daily basis do just that. To a degree heretofore thought impossible. They manage sophisticated international supply chains. And we live right now with a government that can't deliver morally the effective equivalent of a tongue depressor. Despite the fact that this has been going on now at some level internationally now for a few months. It's clear that the severity, or the potential severity, if you will, of this plague, affliction, disease, virus, was going to be available or it was going to be apparent to everyone. And yet, we're still grossly unprepared for it. 401-205-3738. If you'd like to give us a call, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live, if you will, at the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Most folks still view us on the Facebook. Right now, we're broadcasting on YouTube and Periscope simultaneously through the miracle, as we say, of the IP address. Third rail issues, third rail conversations. We've got to get folks into a conversational mode. We've got to get folks to the point where they can actually civilly argue. I didn't say debate. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. People are going to argue. That's okay. If people are listening. You have to be of a certain age to remember The Odd Couple with Felix and Oscar on TV. Oscar, of course, was the grouch, and Oscar was the guy who was a mess, and Felix, of course, was the clean freak. And when Felix didn't want to hear something, he'd put his hands to his ears and go, ah. That's what happens all the time with political debate in America. We are incapable of having reasonable arguments anymore. We've lost that. I'm watching people on Facebook all day who are having a collective nervous breakdown if one side or the other is accused of something or is, somehow associated with some level of negativity. And in some cases, I don't know what they do all day. One or two cases in particular. If El Presidente is accused of some moral failure, some of the best Oppo research in the world are folks diving into their clearly extensive files. It's just breathtaking to watch how much energy they're putting in to defending someone else, someone who not even related to defend their honor. Oy. Now, and it's really difficult not to tease them mercilessly. I hold back only because I'm just too busy. I'm just way too busy. So I hold back in the approach, in the just out of allowing them hopefully to maintain some level of dignity. 401-205-3738. Give us a call if there's anything at all you want to talk to relative to tonight's guest. How about Chase? Able to discuss clearly controversial issues. Able to, with a great deal of, what was the old word of the poem? APLOMB. We try to drop big words here, just trying to impress people with just how freaking smart we are. If you've gotten to know me, you know it doesn't work. So the quiet dignity with which she maintains herself in a political sphere, despite by some would say a controversial career, gives me a lot of hope for the youth. Now, let me point out a few things about millennials. Most of the millennials I know are superstars. They're smart, technically highly skilled, able to survived coursework and exams that, quite frankly, would have left my generation in the dust. They are singularly motivated and directed, and yet they retain this reputation for being lazy, or I don't see it. I simply don't see it. Is it true? Of course it's going to be true in some cases. But folks, before, as we look to the future, understand a few things. If in fact you know a millennial, and I'm using that in a very broad, painting that with a very broad brush in terms of age, who's misdirected and lazy, understand that my generation raised them. I firmly believe that all kids are great kids. So if you raised a screw up very often, look in the mirror. Yeah. Do that. They have been faced with challenges that, again, our challenge was IROC versus Z. Which beach bar to go to in the summer? How to afford a $3,000 college education? Which job to take? Could we handle that $200 a month apartment? Those were the issues we had to face. Challenging stuff. To wear Aramis or not to wear Aramis? These kids, understanding what your reaction is to global warming, and just depending on how you really think it is, global warming. Corona. International police actions. The war on drugs. Stop and frisk. $65,000 a year college educations. $2,300 a month garden apartment rentals. That's the issues these kids have to face. I dare say that many of us we'd crumble against some of the pressures that they're facing. Kids now, those crazy kids, in terms of competing for the best spots in universities, in my case, I was competing with kids growing up in New Jersey, kids from Pennsylvania and New York. And kids from Boston would come down to New York, and the kids from New York would go up to Boston. That was a competition. My daughters are 23 and 25. They had to compete literally with students from around the planet. If some of the children in their class, and yes, I still call them children even at 21, were Indian or Southeast Asian in background, they weren't hyphenated Americans. These are children who grew up in Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, Eastern and Western Europe, Latin and Central America. For the same number of spots, they were competing against literally students from around the planet. We didn't have to compete against that. So when I meet young people who are directed, intelligent, and articulate, and involved, and certainly not lazy, you might have missed something. She owns a home. Okay? She owns a home. And she was able to do that coming from a middle-class background, apparently. Did I mention she owns a home? Yeah, so much for those lazy kids. Yeah. Yikes, what will we do? Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. CoalitionRadio.us. If you could take a moment and follow us on any of those pages, we would be grateful. Area code 401-205-3738. Yeah. Getting back to some programming that's coming up. We are working out right now. We are hoping to have on another repeat offender to the show. When you've been on the show more than once, you become what we call here with love a repeat offender. Lynn Ulbricht joined the show earlier this year. It was a provocative hour. We're talking about Ross Ulbricht of the Silk Road website, who has now been incarcerated for way too long for essentially a business issue. We need to hashtag free Ross. We do. So we're hoping she'll be on this weekend. Really, because I believe in redemption. And I think we're way past the point. Right now, Ross Ulbricht, as far as I'm concerned, all right, is in fact a political prisoner. Chelsea Manning was a political prisoner. Sorry. I'm not going to sit here and blindly defend a government because I live within its borders. If a government has exceeded its force, its power, and its authority, if we don't rein it in, who will? If we don't look to our government and start to fight to end these police actions around the world. Ask a Yemeni how he or she feels about America. I'm thinking that we're not tops of their list. That's what I'm thinking. Because we're going to drone the freedom into them, right? From around the world, American police actions are taking place everywhere. And what do we do about it as a nation? What do we do? Well, I'll tell you what we do. We look beyond the duopoly. One of my least favorite ones is Republicrats. There's lots of more nuanced ways that we can discuss this one-party political system we have. I like the duopoly. That's one of my faves. And understand that we are now facing an election where there is little behavior. Once you get past the rhetoric and the hype, we get the Reds versus the Blues. How about letting the greens and the golds in? Have that? What are you afraid of? My Republican friends will always take a shot because they know it irks me. They know how to get under my skin. They know how to tease me. And I know it. And I know they're doing it to tease me. And I'm a sucker for it. But what is it about the Republican and the Democratic parties that claim to be so different, and each one is taking a high, noble road? Yet in reality, when you get past the rhetoric, when you get past the hype, when you get past the team jerseys, they both behave the same way. It's all about power. As the great Jerry Seinfeld says, it's all about rooting for laundry. If you'd like to debate me on that, you can call me any night that I'm on. At 401-205-3738. One of the folks who was listening earlier took a shot at me because at the time we only had 3-4 listeners on this channel. We do, by the way, for the record, like I said, we do play simultaneously on multiple channels. First of all, he thought the show was boring. Okay. You're certainly open to your own personal opinion. But regardless of whether two people are listening, or in the case of sometimes we get a lot more. Regardless of that, we're going to have real conversations here. And that's off-putting to some people who, again, prefer to listen to What's Your Favorite Color Radio. So for those people, if they think that's boring to discuss real issues concerning life and death issues, real analysis of the First Amendment, in the case of Free Ross, real analysis of the Fourth Amendment in regards to the sex worker decriminalization movement, real analysis of the Second Amendment, I make some of my progressive friends insane because I believe that the right to bear arms is not a constitutional right. I believe it's a natural right. The right to engage in self-defense is so sacred in the American system of jurisprudence that, in fact, the sin of committing the ultimate act in Western justice, that is murder, is absolved if it occurs as a part of an act of self-defense. So if we regard that so highly on such a religious level, then why aren't we willing to enable people to do that? Well, they don't need those guns. Well, I don't need a lot of things. Do I want them? Yeah. Irony, by the way, I don't smoke weed. I don't own a gun. Yet I believe in the full the full legalization of drugs, because I believe that people are entitled to body autonomy. I torture my progressive friends when they talk about a woman's right to choose, which I support because of body ownership. And then I talk about all the other things that their government will not allow me to have. I torture them about the fact that gambling bad. People do it, gambling bad. Bookies, bad people. Send them to jail. Government do gambling? Good. They're good people. Very recently, the head of the lottery commission here in Rhode Island, whose name I won't mention, resigned. I missed it because, you know what? He did a little bit of a tour. I was expecting more of a redemption tour. When I say redemption, I believe that he needs to redeem himself. His entire career, obviously Jerry Aubin, oops, I said it, is a very talented individual. He's smart, articulate. I've heard him speak. Doesn't need my say-so. But what did he spend his career doing? On one of the issues that Sam Bell and I agree on, we believe that gambling should be legal. I just don't believe a state should balance its budgets on games of chance that were engineered by neuroscientists who essentially find ways to tweak the brain, basically gear the development of the games. That's why we call VLTs video crack, in order to get folks so attached to them that they won't give them up, despite the fact that they're losing money they can ill afford to lose. Now, again, that's their personal choice. I won't make that for them. But why is it good if government does that? Good. Third largest source of revenue. We need the revenue, don't we? What will we do without the revenue? And what will we do, by the way, without people who are willing to ascribe to government any level of power whatsoever, as long as they get the revenue? 401-205-3738. By the way, I can do this for hours. I love this. I absolutely love the talk radio medium. I'm so jealous of people who get to do it for a living that as long as this crisis is going on, it looks like I'm going to try and be doing it for a living. Uh-oh. Super producer Joel isn't here right now to do the sound effects. I love this. I love the fact that we've got sound effects. I love the fact that I've got a dump button even though I won't use it. I love the fact that a couple of indie folks all of a sudden are in a position to do the very same thing that the big boys are, which again is a very libertarian concept. The notion that I don't need an FCC license, that I can simply sit here and talk all night alone, talk to you, talk at you, talk around you, without any government interference whatsoever, is music to my eternal soul. I could sit here and make fun of Gina's stupid push-up contest. Gina is desperately trying to get some. She's tried catchphrases. Now it's the push-up challenge. Desperately trying to get something to go viral so that, hallelujah, people will ignore the constant attack on our civil liberties that's taking place just a heartbeat away. Not working. We see through your bullshit. That's another thing. I get to say the word bullshit on the air. When the folks at WPRO are kind enough to let me call in and have a conversation, I have to use the word balderdash. Always understand that I mean bullshit. Not even like pretend bullshit. Real bullshit. Jeaner, the woman who attacks medical cannabis, yet she cares. She considered this to be the job interview of her career. And her legion, her phalanx, if you will, her Praetorian Guard of PR flax hacks and whatever are there, but are there to try and present her alternate reality to the world, so that when she runs for God, well, first of all, let me just say this: if she runs for vice president with Joe Biden, I might just consider voting for Joe Biden for one reason only, so she can leave here. Congratulations, Jeaner. God bless you. Don't let the door be, well, the Irish saying is don't let be letting the door hit in the arse on the way out. I'd be good with that. I would be fine if, in fact, she left. Area code 401-205-3738. Give us a call if there's anything you want to talk about. We have an open mic. We just went on the air with this little radio station about a week and a half ago. I call it a radio station. We call it Coalition Radio. It's obviously video. It's obviously radio. It's obviously all of it on the internet for your dining pleasure. Earlier this evening, we had Jace Koch on. Let me pronounce it again. Tikach. Got it down. All right. I'm Irish. You put too many vowels, or I should say consonants in a row, we get confused. We absolutely get confused. But if there's issues that you want to talk about in our brandy new little operation here, the Coalition has been on the air for 6 years, typically a Friday night show in the last 4 or 5, in terms of the iterations, 3 hours at a pop, 3 different folks on. We continue that effort. We will be on the air tomorrow night from about 6:30 or so till whenever. We'll have guests on till about 9 o'clock, and then we will go open lines like this. Now, this is interesting to me because we get a fair amount of listeners. We did an interview at 9 o'clock in the morning with Rhode Island Progressive Democrat State Senator Sam Bell. Cumulative views now are across all our different ways that you can watch the shows in 1,000, 2,000 views. So we're local. We're small. We're always trying to develop that critical mass. It may be the fact that we go into too many details, that the conversation is too complex for some people, as someone complained earlier tonight. Maybe it's me. We've never been able to crack through that 10,000, 20,000 viewers once. But ultimately, we cover issues of substance here. So the question was, how do we take it further? Now, originally, the plan was we were going to go live, sometime next month. We'd be able to do remote call-ins, and we were actively working with folks who were going to put shows on the air here of a variety of types for the greater culture, as we like to call it. Well, Corona knocked that down. Still working on the concept, still working on ways to deliver content, information, conversations digitally. But in the meantime, I love talk radio. Anyone who lives with me here in Rhode Island knows I love talk radio. I love the art. I love the form. I love the fact that it can be America's town hall. I love the fact that if you have an opinion, you can deliver it. And the difference here between this and conventional talk radio is we will respect that opinion for one very simple reason, because it's yours. So even if you and I vehemently disagree, which means we really, 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 really disagree, I'm going to respect your right to say it. We are outrage porn free here. I'm not going to allow folks to insult folks. I'm not going to allow people to lie, if in fact I'm smart enough to know that they're lying. You can get some whoppers by me, believe me. I'm not an expert. I simply play one on the radio. But at the same time, there needs to be a place for higher thought. So it's been interesting over the last week or so. We've been playing around with the format, opening up the lines of conversation. We've gotten callers. And interestingly enough, because we're so new and, it's late at night that people listen to this, that we've gotten callers. Sometimes we've been on the phone for 20 minutes or so. You won't get that in talk radio. Speaking before, a smallish crowd. Content seems to be, since people don't have a habit here, and the Facebook algorithms don't like the fact that we're political, because we're really, really, really political. Not even pretend political. Sometimes not even polite political. Our guest earlier this evening represented really all the dynamic forces that exist in folks' youth today. Clearly embracing her sexuality to the point where that's part of the way that she earns a living. Clearly embracing her politics. She ran for public office in her first try against an entrenched incumbent, got about 12% of the vote as a libertarian in highly Republican upstate New York, was simultaneously providing a viewpoint that includes what folks in the major media, because they're lazy, would consider highly progressive, liberal social policies. We know they're not. Here's the single biggest difference between a progressive's outlook on a quote-unquote issue of social nature and ours. We don't expressly endorse any behavior. Now, I support same-sex marriage, and the Libertarian Party has since the 70s. We just have. But here's our reasoning. You as an adult are entitled to engage in relationships with whom you want to. Notice I said relationships. That is plural. So if you happen to practice polyamory and you are engaged in a relationships that may involve multiple consenting adults, God bless America. That's what I got to say. It's all good to me. Hey, JT Dodge says, hi, Pat. Then he says, impressive. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Hey, JT Dodge, give us a call. Thanks for saying something nice. We appreciate that. This is hard work, by the way, even though I love every single minute of it. A lot of times I'll take on the quote-unquote mainstream media, not in the bias sense. Folks need to get over the fact that mainstream media is biased. Of course it's biased. Go back to the 19th century, early American newspapers. They were owned by robber barons. And they were owned as a way of promoting their own personal interests. It's a private business. If you own it, you get to make it whatever you want. That's really great. I mean, that's America. Now, it's up to you as a discerning listener or viewer. It's entirely up to you, all right, to decide whether or not you want to purchase or, in many cases, read or watch for free. That's up to you. There's no entitlement. You have no right to dictate to that organization what line of reasoning, if any at all, it would appear in some cases, they choose to have. None of your business. It just isn't. So we need to get over this whole, they're biased, like Clinton News Network. Okay. If you're a discerning, purveyor, reader, analyzer, prognosticator, deliberator, I can keep going, by the way, of the news, you know they're biased. You read their editorial pages. I'm a libertarian. One of the newspapers I grew up on was something called the Village Voice. In the 70s and 80s, the Village Voice was, quite frankly, one of the leading progressive papers in the nation. It created, if you will, the entire niche for artsy independent newspapers, to which I'm profoundly grateful. One of the business models for this is to essentially bring you that indie newspaper to the airwaves. That's what we're going to try and do. Hopefully we won't end up like a lot of the indie newspapers, particularly after these last few weeks. My God, the carnage just because of advertising issues is just brutal to a lot of people who've worked very, very hard. Very, very hard. So that's the medium. It's an attempt to raise the level of conversation. Not that I'm somebody to aspire to. We send a little email out to all our guests, and it says, if you have an idea and you want to run with it, please do. Because our guests are profoundly more interesting than the host. Profoundly. Chase Sakach is, as a 20-something, is already much more interesting than I am. Just is. And I want to celebrate that. I want to bring people on the air who are going to piss you off. Yeah, I said it. But they're going to do so not because of they're the insult comic dogs. They're not going to do so because they're going to mire themselves in outrage porn. None of that. They're going to do so because they are provocative. Because they represent a line of thinking that may be, in some cases, completely foreign to you. Our guest tonight alluded to it as one of the folks who submitted a question. There was a point in time where if you were out as an active sex worker, if you led an alternative lifestyle at any level, and let's define alternative, that's a goalpost that's changed over the last 10, 20 years. If you did anything beyond what was considered at that point in time a societal norm, it was political suicide. In certain areas, we progress as a society. We now embrace our differences. We no longer see people's personal behavior, as long as it is not injurious to others, as a barrier to entry to the political world. Thank God. My God, thank God. So someone who's as provocative as that is willing to engage in the field of political battle, then I'm thrilled to know them because they make me smarter. I sit there and listen to their life experiences. I sit there and listen to their decision-making, and I have a completely different perspective after walking away from them. That I can simply reduce to a very simple sports analogy. Always play tennis against someone who's better than you. Always play tennis against someone who's got a different style than you. That's how you become a better tennis player. If you're just joining us, folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us. Seen folks come and go. If you like the platform, just leave us a message. If you'd like to call in, it's 401-205-3738. If you call in, it'll really spare the other folks who are here the indignity of having to listen to me vamp for an hour and a half. I can do it. I love doing it. But you're helping your fellow audience members if you call in. Feel free to debate me, challenge me, insult me, provoke me. It's okay. Believe me when I say you can't hurt my feelings. Believe me. I'm a middle-aged guy who has experienced a lot of life's challenges. And I'm hoping that this format can create can create a field of play where nothing less than intellectual battle will take place. That's what I'm hoping. Prove me right. We'll do this after we have guests on, whenever possible. We'll try this. What I was alluding to earlier is, so you've got stations backed by big companies with big budgets and advertising. We're just little indie media. Sponsor and listener supported. God, you've heard those words before. Oh, yeah. These are hard times for everybody, so if you go to coalitionradionetwork.com, we do have a PayPal link. You want to throw us a few pennies, we'd be grateful. A few shekels. But Lord, do we know how hard it is for everybody out there right now. Lives altered in seemingly a minute. But what do you think? Bernie Bales, again, doesn't take up the challenge to run it as an independent, doesn't continue the fight, endorses the establishment Democrat. I guess that's what I'm most disappointed by. I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter. Anyone who's listened to us before knows that. I was hoping he was going to take it to the, just for the sake of all the people I know personally who've worked so very hard in his so very, very hard. I know people who bled for Bernie Sanders. And I'm not going to take shots at their guy. I'm just disappointed that, I don't know. I guess I'm just disappointed by the whole, I'm going to support the statist, and Biden in particular. It will shock some that I consider Joe Biden to be a much, much worse actor than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was driven by greed. Say what you want. A greed for power, a greed for money. Biden, I consider, despite his gentlemanly, courtly, like grandfatherly, it has had a profoundly. So you see, Hillary tried to have all the power. Joe Biden is responsible for so much pain in this country. And a few of his ilk. War on drugs. So many of our international police actions. Sentencing standards. Literally, he is a walking testament to failed government. I personally find it repulsive that his sons gravy train their way from him to be multimillionaires. Whatever behavior they engage in personally, that's on them. But ultimately, the fact that they were accorded jobs and opportunities simply because of who their dad was, got a problem with that. Old Orange Cheeto, he's right on that. He's absolutely right. Area code 401-205-3738. Give us a call. So yeah, that's my disappointment with Bernie. That's my disappointment. The notion that he would just give into that. Don't know why he chose to run as a Democrat. I mean, believe me, I know better than anyone alive the challenges facing third-party types. Yeah. I get that. Boy, do I get that. One caller says, or I should say, listener says, Joe Biden will forget he's running for president. Yeah, about that. Listen, it was the old Boston Phoenix / Providence Phoenix, Felipe and Jorge's column, which still, I believe, exists in Motif, which is a fine local publication, by the way. I hope Motif is hanging in there. Largely, like so many of us, advertiser-driven. Very well done, though. So that's where I believe you could still find Felipe and Jorge, one of the great columns, if you will, in Rhode Island indie history. Jorge, though, came up with the term back in the day, and we're going back a few years, discussing President Ronald Reagan, called him President Alzheimer. Oof. That was back at a time, by the way, you could say incredible things like that. We didn't have cancel culture. Comics should be incredibly offensive. People got it. That was humor. You might find not your style of humor. So back what you did then was you stopped listening to it. If you found a Carlin, who so many people profess to love now, by the way, Mr. Carlin was quite controversial in his day. He went from being the clean-cut, nice guy humor, if you will, seen on the Ed Sullivan Show, to being quite the contrarian. And I use that term loosely. Comic genius. I wonder how he would have been treated today. When he called out someone and ultimately, would that shut him off from a college campus? Let me know how you feel about cancel culture. Not cancer, cancel culture. If you're just joining us, we are the Coalition. 401-205-3738. If you're up late tonight, feel free. So yeah, this whole call-in thing is new to us. And it's interesting because we're trying to figure out a way to provoke people's phone calls. You can get away with a lot more here on an indie station. You can get a lot more. I say away with a lot more. (401-205-3738). So I responded on Joe Biden's page today with something pretty insulting. Again, I don't use obscenities. I don't. No. Not really my thing. By the way, I'm watching the Facebook world fly by as I sit here on this lonely night. The social media has been kind of quiet at nights. You would have expected with all this downtime. Maybe that's because people have exorcised their demons. Already. 401-205-3738. Oh, my. Joe Biden will forget he's running for president. Oof. That's kind of rough. Reading general comments out there. Also interesting finding out what else is it that people would like to see on media. By the way, join us tomorrow night. We'll have guests all night long. And we're hoping to test the technology tomorrow night that'll allow us to have a guest on and talking, and you would be able to call in. It appears it bothers some people, including me sometimes. Although I get it, I guess, deep down. We're going to take a quick break by now, but it bothers me sometimes when guests come on and they don't have to answer questions. We're going to take a quick station break. Coalition Radio. And we are back. Yep, tomorrow night, starting at about 6:30, 6-ish, we'll start an accumulation of guests that you will find riveting. We tend to have a lot of folks on who are think tank orientated, as our former president would say. So we drive and derive from a number of think tanks across the nation, as well as having local political leaders. So it would be easy for us, to roll out the same list of Rhode Islanders all the time, trying to shoot for a little bit higher. If you've got suggestions on something you'd like to do with this, please let us know. You can reach me. By the way, if you have a small business that you'd like to have on the air, pford@coalitionradio.us. pford@coalitionradio.us. We love promoting businesses. Just yesterday, we had some wonderful local businesses. Folks in landscaping. We've got some restaurant people who are trying to figure out a way to do some level of broadcast live from their facility right now. By the way, congratulations go out to Chris Thrasher, who, by the way, was the chief architect, along with a variety of members from the LNC. Like Gary Johnson on the ballot in 2016 in all 50 states. Little trivia, guess which state was last? Yes, that would be Rhode Island. In 2016, I never forget, I believe it was a Friday afternoon where Chris and I drove to town halls all over Rhode Island, dropping off signatures. And I guess that was a Jeopardy question today. So a shout out to a gentleman by the name of Bill Redpath, and who's with the Libertarian Party nationally, who has been instrumental for a generation now orchestrating ballot drives in order to get candidates on the ballot, in order to get the party on the ballot. And Chris Thrasher, who was the architect and one of the leaders of the 50-state ballot drive for the Johnson Weld campaign. A lot of questions come up right now with regard to how folks are going to get signatures for candidacies this summer in the age of COVID-19. The Rhode Island Secretary of State's office, who, by the way, and this is coming from a Libertarian, highly professional, highly responsive to grassroots initiatives. Now, they're working within a difficult set of state laws, but they bend over backwards to try and give folks the assistance, the technical information, answer legal questions revolving around getting candidates on the ballot. They'll be addressing that, but that remains to be an interesting, unchecked question. How do you do that? Anyway, yesterday we had Mike Underwood on, and that is up on our Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio page. You can watch that interview. Mike has been politically involved in the past. He has served our nation, a retiree of the United States Coast Guard, also known as Rhode Island's own private Navy. He runs his own construction / landscape company. Has managed to keep the doors open. We talked about the critical importance, if you will, of doing just that in the age of COVID. How important it is to be able to keep people employed, how important it is to keep the wheels turning. What does that mean to a local community when you support someone like Mike Underwood? You're keeping a family at work, doing what they love. You're helping keep a business alive. As someone who's been involved in a couple of closely held businesses, it is challenging to resuscitate a business. It is not simple. It is not like on television where you have an idea and you hatch it over late night coffees or a couple of beers, and then the next day, Shazam. Judy, let's do a show. And all of a sudden, magically, that business opens. And magically, it's successful. As someone who's been self-employed a significant portion of his life, I've had people tell me, well, it's great. You get to set your own schedule. You're self-employed. And I would always respond, well, yeah, if I'm awake, I'm working. Like right now. Having the time of my life, but if I'm working. But Mike's business goes well beyond that. Mike uses largely local suppliers. And Mike's business is illustrative of so many other local Rhode Island businesses. So we went down through the checklist. If one of Mike's customers needs irrigation, there's a local irrigation company that he calls for his landscaping work. If Mike's business needs plants, there's a local gardening operation that he goes to, a local horticultural operation that he goes to buy the plants. If crushed stone, there's a local company. What happens then? This is the simplest, but right now one of the most important lessons in economics you can have. Ultimately, folks then will have some money coming through the door. Where will they spend that? The beauty of local businesses is that the money stays local. There's something in economics called the multiplier effect. And the multiplier effect is, well, Mike gets a couple $100 for doing a job. He then spends $175 of that on fuel, parts, this, that, insurance. Most of that money is spent locally at local businesses. The profits from that, as well as the expenses, then are largely spent locally again. And the business money flies back and forth around interested parties, sometimes unknown to each other, around the community. And wealth is created. Families are supported. Folks are fed. Tuition bills are met. Insurance bills are paid. And that's the magic of the free market. That's why it's so important to support local business. On top of getting a great job done by a guy like Mike, on top of that warm feeling you have at a time like this, a time of crisis, where you engaging that local business literally can mean the difference between success and failure. And you see it right in front of your eyes. People certainly aren't taking those businesses for granted anymore. People who are spending money at them. And certainly, right now, you can probably drive a heck of a deal at a lot of these local businesses. Because, we all need each other in this situation, right? Rhode Island, the fabric of Rhode Island is locally owned, family-owned businesses. One of the great sponsors of this show, of course, is Yacht Club Soda. 107 plus years in business. They pay taxes locally to the state of Rhode Island, the city of North Providence, from their Centerdale location. They employ people. The sodas that they make use natural flavors. So that means somebody in Rhode Island is selling them the ginger for the ginger ale. Someone is selling him the ingredients for his root beer, the finest root beer on the planet. Someone is supplying him with the glass bottles, those crystal clear glass bottles, when with chilled at an appropriate temperature, provides a refreshing, if you will, respite from a difficult day. I'd rather have a Yacht Club root beer than a beer anytime. Call me crazy. But again, all that money stays in the local economy largely. Most of their purchases are local as well. In addition to being a generous provider of their beverages for a whole host of local organizations, they are the fuel, the rocket fuel, that keeps Rhode Island running. I've mentioned a couple times in the last few days when we had guests on and when I kind of ramble on like this in the hopes that folks will give us a phone call late at nights. I take great humor in the notion that there are folks in Washington getting together and deciding, how are we going to restart the economy? Restart the economy. How about focusing and not screwing it up? How about getting out of the way so that folks like Yacht Club Soda and the Mike Underwoods of the world and all of these folks out there who, whose labor of love is a local business. How about that? How about just getting out of the way? Leaving these folks alone, not taxing them to death. Mike made mention of the corporate minimum tax here in Rhode Island. So if you're going to be a corporation and you become a corporation in a sense to protect yourself, to indemnify yourself personally from a great deal of litigation, it costs you $450 a year here in Socialist Workers Paradise, Rhode Island, to merely open up the doors and say that you're a variety of form of corporation. $450 a year so that you can be state sanctioned. I often talk about revenue neutrality and taxes. Back when it was a reasonable amount, I think it was $100 to $200 a year, there were all sorts of corporations. And in the wake of them raising that money, I've asked legislators, the salons, the great minds, if you will, up at Halitosis Hall, all credit to Rudy Cheeks. I've said to them, have you ever done an analysis of revenue neutrality in the different levels of corporate minimum taxes? Well, what do you mean? How many people had a corporation, kind of a side hack, as we would call it now, side gig, some side action? Maybe it was a business that you'd had for a number of years and then you went to work for somebody, but you kept it alive because you did the occasional job through it. Maybe you had some sort of retirement plan in it, something. Maybe it was just laziness. Maybe you didn't want to take the extra step. Maybe the finality of closing the corporation in and of itself was an act that you just didn't want to involve yourself in. Could have been for hundreds of reasons. But you kept it alive. For a while there, it was 5 bills, as we like to say on the street. 5 bills. At 5 bills, you don't feel that bad about shutting it down anymore. So the reality is, what type of analysis has been done prior to raising the corporate minimum tax in the state to see whether or not, because of the sheer number of companies that were open, they made more money than if they just raised it to this astonishingly, it's a ripoff. It's a freaking ripoff. And if you want to put it into human terms, how much soda does Yacht Club have to sell to make $450? How many extra lawns or how many extra hours does Mike Underwood have to stay away from his family out in a hot field in a hot yard, working hard? I mean hard, to make $450 so that we can feed some type of bureaucracy. That fee should cover simply just the cost of maintaining those records. It should be a fraction of that. And then watch small businesses open up, because that's one less obstacle, one less barrier to entry, one less roadblock to them just simply opening the doors. Ever wonder what it costs a guy like Mike Underwood or Yacht Club, or any one of the thousands of local businesses, how much it costs for them just to wake up in the morning? I don't think they want to know. I think some of them probably are in denial over it. I don't blame them. Simply to open the doors. We went through a little bit of the math with Mike. Spending $12,000+ in insurance for essentially a 1, 2, or 3-man operation. Again, simply to open the doors. To do nothing else. To simply open the doors. So when you look at the aggregate, the sheer totality of what it costs to do a business, are we surprised that they fail in Rhode Island? Are we surprised that so few start them, say, relative to other parts of the nation? Here's the real tragedy. There will be businesses that will have the opportunity to reopen. And in how many cases? We'll never know the answer to this, I believe. It's impossible to calculate. How many businesses where post-corona, if that happens soon, I hope, where folks will simply then look at the cost of running a business here in this state and simply say, no mas. You know what? I'm going to retire / get a job / fill in the blanks. And what does that mean? Well, there's the personal tragedy, if you will, of people having invested years of their lives into starting a business. And it is a labor of love. Look at me right here, folks. Here I am. There's folks out there listening now, and I'm grateful. If you're out there right now and you're listening to the show, thank you very much. I'd love to have you call in at 401-205-3738. We've had some people call in. Great guest earlier in the evening, Chase Tkach, a young lady employed in adult entertainment, but also a serious political grassroots operative, someone who is raising the flag of liberty all over upstate New York. So, how many of those businesses will never come back because simply folks can't gear up the energy to restart them, and they look at the math with a more jaundiced eye. When you're in the middle of a business, it's very difficult to bring yourself to say, hey, you know what? I got to stop this. What was it Susan Powder, the lady with the short white hair, would say back in the 80s? Stop the madness. Well, I've got to stop the madness. You're emotionally involved in it. You're in the heart of it. You're doing it every day. Odds are you really enjoy a lot of the work that you do, but ultimately it's a little more difficult to take stock of it. But if you've just spent the last 3 months or 2 months, God forbid, or 4 months, even heaven forbid, whatever, not engaged in this business, and you look at the cost that you're going to incur just to re-jumpstart it with no guarantees of success, and if in fact that success happens is despite the best efforts of government, then what happens to those businesses? And what happens to the businesses that profited from their existence? And on and on and on and down that food chain. The volume of businesses that ultimately lose because of the zero-sum gain of running a business in the dreaded private sector in what is I commonly refer to Rhode Island as Soviet workers' paradise. Is it worth the stress, the hours? And that's an individual impression that only that individual can make. I'm smart like that. And we don't know the answer to that, and we won't for quite some time. So as this governor makes arbitrary decisions involving people's lives, there is a notion by some that it only involves the immediacy of the moment as it occurs, or I should say, as it reflects the depth of this crisis physically. But there is so much more than that. And the notion that we've ceded those powers to government, I believe, is terrible. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network. You're in the bunker, in the hills above La Prave, the naked city, the city we love. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We'll be on again tomorrow evening from 6-ish till whenever it takes me. We'd love to have some phone calls. We understand that not everybody is a talk radio or caller type. One of our listeners says, how can I get a case to me? What, the Yacht Club? Great question. Yacht Club is available at stores throughout Rhode Island. I believe that Rhodey Fresh is doing the delivery thing. They might be on with them. You can also go to Centerdale, to their store, and they also ship nationally now. You can get whatever you want when you want. Now, again, I'm a big fan of the family of sodas. I don't know. I don't know if there's a name for it, but the root beer, cream, and sarsaparilla. Those are my three faves. It's all good. By the way, they do a quinine-based tonic water that is to die for. So if you do a gin and tonic, if you run a real gin and tonic, it is in fact, you should be employing Yacht Club's tonics. Now, there are a variety of folks out there who are ascribing all sorts of health effects, if you will, to drinking quinine. I'm not an expert, as I always say. I just play one on the radio. So I'll refrain from that. But if you are looking for a true gin and tonic, TNT, as we used to say, Tanqueray and tonic with lime, then Yacht Club's mixers should be your destination. Haven't been able to do gin and tonic since senior year of college. It was a Carlos Santana concert, midnight show, an amazing musical experience. I don't think I've had many G&Ts since then. We'll just leave it at that. So let's see what's going on out there in the coalition world. By the way, take a moment if you go to our Facebook page and, if you will, listen to the interview with Sam Bell. We were with him for over an hour. Sam's pretty good at taking control of the mic. I just like to listen, sitting back and listen. He took a couple of, I wouldn't say it swings, but gentle jibes at me, repeating on a number of occasions the failure of the free markets. I don't go there, but I just let him hold forth. And let's just say Sam's pretty good with a microphone. Made a lot of observations about the management of a variety of the Rhode Island hospitals, the failure, as in his mind, of them to provide a safe working environment. He's no fan of Ms. Coit at DEM. And he expressed his frustrations, if you will, with the, shall we say, the Rhode Island State Legislature, the folks at Halitosis Hall, who've managed, despite being the third co-equal branch that covers expenditures and the monies, despite that, he has not been able to attend a session. We've also got up on our our website, coalitionradio.us, a civil liberties page. You will find an astonishing white paper there from no one less than the American Civil Liberties Union, who are doing an analysis of the civil liberty implications of cell phone tracking and what's involved. Simply go to coalitionradio.us and click on the Civil Liberties page. Also, a great interview up on that page. We call it Why You Should Join the ACLU. And before my Republican friends throw up in their Wheaties, understand that the ACLU has been behind supporting the Second Amendment for years, has done yeoman's work in helping to work towards small government. I've always said about the ACLU that if somehow they haven't at some point in time pissed everybody off, they're simply not doing their job. So, how are we doing on the time front? It is 11:32. We're going to be closing up shop soon. Come on, folks, make a phone call. Let us know what you're thinking. I love to talk to other Rhode Islanders. Oh, someone else. We've got a troll in the house. That's all good. You can tease. We're trying to start something new here. The path will not always be clear. There will those who will take an opportunity to point humor out at you. It's all good. Yet, he's listening, so. Or he was. Great stuff. Maybe if I come up with some new names for Gina Raimondo, he'll like us better. Or maybe maybe come up with some new names for President Obama or Sleepy Joe Biden. Maybe he'll like us better. Sorry, wrong place. This is the interesting part about starting something from scratch like this, a new effort. There are probably going to be some long nights ahead of us. I don't mind. The occasional caller, the occasional listener here late at night makes it all worthwhile. WZBZ in Boston, 10:30 a.m. for years, had some great and kooky late night results. They would have some coming on the air around, I believe, right at midnight, and they'd go through all the way through till 5 o'clock in the morning. And there are times, and this is in Boston, there were times where the host would just talk to himself for a half hour at a time. And then there was an entire crew of insomniacs who would call in, who you could tell hadn't been asleep for days for a variety of reasons, some of which were lifestyle-induced, some of which were, let's just say, the result of maybe a host of different mood-ameliorating substances. But they would call in, the folks who were staring at a TV show, and basically they just wanted someone to talk to. And the results could be either terrible or spectacular. I was disappointed recently just to tune back to that. I hadn't listened for a while. To see that it looking like they'd gone to an all news format all night. That's disappointing. Radio-based talk radio is in decline here in America. The art of conversation is dying. It's cheaper just to put up syndicated news or syndicated shows rather than pay for talent. Real talent. Not this talent, but real talent. Cheaper to do that. It's easier. And we lose something. We're blessed here in this state. WPRO AM 630 has political talk from about 9 o'clock in the morning, if you will, depending on what you think of Gene Valicenti's show, if that's true political talk or is it really drive time radio. From 9 o'clock in the morning till about 6 o'clock at night. And a lot of great conversation takes place. Sometimes I'm even fortunate enough to be part of it. I believe, though, that there is a need for late night radio. We've had one or two shots of guests in late at night. We call it Coalition After Dark. We'll be trying that over the weekend as well. Material of a more adult nature. We had Jesse Sage on earlier this week under Coalition After Dark. Jesse's an adult entertainer who writes a newspaper piece for an alt-weekly out in Pennsylvania. As well as does a podcast, produces her own content. She was great. Her and her husband do something called the Peep Show Podcast. And we hope to get them back on the show sometime soon. Bella Robinson, who of the Coyote RI, has been on the show, Lord, a few dozen times over the years. Back in our original days on AM radio, through to our first shot at digital with the fine folks at Go Local Prov. On through now. She's already been on here, and we hope to have her on again. So that's the type of thing that we're going to be doing in Coalition After Dark. Probably next week we'll get Professor Andy Hernandez on. He, of course, a professor at the Western New Mexico University System. An astonishing professor who teaches courses in the drug wars, the history of colonialism along the Mexican-American border, the border wars that have taken place over generations. Provides us with a real insight as to what's going on with immigration. So that's the type of thing you can expect. You can find it at coalitionradio.us, and actually, more likely now you can find, we'll update the show schedule for the rest of the weekend later on tonight at coalitionradionetwork.com. Ba-ba-ba. Sorry about that. So I think we're going to start to wind things down. Yep, it's time to wind things down. Oh, we got a couple of people who joined us. If you're just joining us earlier this evening, we had Chase Takash on the line for about an hour. And now we're just kind of hanging out, talking live on the radio, if you will, the internet radio, the internet TV. We've been on the air now in this format for a little under 2 weeks. We're experimenting with different formats to see what folks in Rhode Island are looking for. I've always contended that people are looking for late night talk shows, particularly with a more of an adult perspective, covering issues that adults need to talk about. It could be politics, sexuality, immigration, right to life issues. That's the type of work. We're also going to be looking to increase. And in fact, prior to Corona, our initial emphasis was getting additional content on. Now that effectively access to the studio is limited because of health issues, we're kind of rejiggering our look on how we're going to get some alternative media on. So I think at this moment in time, we're going to take leave of us this evening. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network, here at the CoalitionRadioNetwork.com headquarters in the hills above La Prove, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of a few 100,000 stories. Tonight we told one. We'll be telling more as early as tomorrow. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, CoalitionRadio.us, the mothership, where access to all of our programming can be found. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.